Okay, so the next item up for discussion is community facilities. That's on page 93.
Oh, okay.
So that's you, Blair, is it?
I've got the first two of these, which
It's
is
a
housing.
hybrid, isn't it?
So it is a hybrid. So
Yeah, it's another
my
one.
colleague Lance was around, but I noticed that Deanne and Sally are behind me. All right, Sally is. So here he comes. So I can
We're on
certainly.
to community facilities, Lance, which is another one of our 50-50s here.
I'll let that 50 go first.
Okay, that 50's going first, all right. All right, so Blair, do you want to highlight anything in particular?
The only item I just wanted to highlight was with regards to housing, and we have noted this in the assumptions, that there is a fee increase proposed for housing. This is to bring it to 100% cost recovery ratio, but it would be our proposal, and this is also noted in the fees and charges, that that fee increase be held until the outcome of the sale process is known in the latter part of next year. And I propose that the offset of that revenue that we would forego in that period of time, we would save in terms of operational costs through less maintenance in that same period.
All right, and Lance, have you got anything that you want to add to your areas?
Cemeteries and crematorium is basically business as usual, including CapEx, notwithstanding the management plan, but it does reflect pretty much what is in the management plan. There are some unfunded projects, but I think councillors have discussed that previously. And community facilities, we've just we've put an unfunded some of the building renewals around some of those facilities that are subject to the review we're doing.
Right.
So we haven't put that in. They're reasonably minimal amounts, but I think that could be reviewed once we bring that report back.
So that's coming back in February, isn't
Yes,
it?
that's correct.
Okay. Right, any questions on this area?
So I just wanted a clarification. I think I heard Blair say in regards to 96, capital expenditure, housing, pension housing renewals, we're delaying that till the result of the sale process?
No, that's in regards to the fees and charges. In regards to the capital expenditure for renewals, we've scaled that back to a essential health and safety renewals component, again reflecting that we're in a period of sale. But the fees and charges, when we get to fees and charges, you'll see a very specific recommendation to say that the increase is held pending the outcome of the sale process next year.
So you're saying that it's still important to keep $2 million in that over the next 10 years?
Well, we're in a unique situation where we're having to reflect in the 10-year plan that the activity continues, albeit we've made a decision to sell, but we're not in this long-term plan presuming the outcome of the sale process until we've seen that. So what we have done, councillors, is reduced the renewals from that in the asset management plan to an essential health and safety type requirement. And you'll note in the assumptions where we talk about if there was renewals greater than that required during that period of time, we still have the renewal, the special fund of $3.3 million, which is cash backed, sitting there, and through application to council, we could spend some of that money if required for essential renewals above that $200,000. Of course, all of this will be changed pending the outcome of the sale process.
Okay. Any other questions on this topic? No? Councillor Gallagher, is that you?
Oh no, is that on the cemeteries? Is that now next, is it?
No, we're on to that now.
Right.
We're on to that now, page 93.
95, just on the cemeteries, the unfunded, the Morrinsville Road entrance, I hope this is the right time to ask that question. It's just about the safety aspects, Lance. Has there been any feedback on that? I'm just trying to think with increasing use, and it's a restricted 80k area in that, but just that exit way over time. I'm just wondering if any thought have been. That may be just a traffic management issue, but it's how you have that free turn. Yeah. I think of older people and I
might get Sally to comment.
Sally, do you?
If I can, through the chair, in terms of this project, it's actually upgrading the entranceway to the cemetery,
Yeah.
and it would look at obviously any safety concerns, but at this point of time, we don't have those. There is obviously a reduced speed zone through that area.
Yes,
and
yes.
If there was any concerns, we'd obviously need to talk to the district council around that for that road.
Just to keep an eye, and if you know, because particularly with that free turn back, yeah, just, okay, no, appreciate that.
Okay, any other questions on this one?
So just on the pensioner housing sale, we really, until we know how that breaks down, we're really just explain that, we're in a whole, I read somewhere around vacant possession, not once people leave our current housing stock. Have I got that right? If people leave now, tomorrow, from our stock, we don't fill that until the sale process is sorted. Is that correct?
We're taking a cautious approach to that.
Yeah.
So we do have a waiting list. Whether we accept any new people on that waiting list is something we're just carefully working through. So we're conscious that for the next 6 to 9 months, we are in a period where we have a decision to sell, but we don't yet know the outcome of that process because we're yet to see what offers come in and bring those back to council for consideration. So we just want to carefully manage the size and expectations of any current or any potential future tenants.
Yeah, so you're expecting that fairly neutral at this?
Yes, so the long-term plan here is trying to be very neutral. It's reflecting that it's business as usual in terms of the budgets. We haven't anticipated any sale proceeds, been very conservative. We therefore need to reflect that we continue to operate and maintain those properties, but we've taken a conservative stance in terms of how we will maintain those, noting we have $3.3 million in a reserve, ring-fenced, available if there was any particularly large, unexpected renewal requirements that came up in the next 6 to 9 months. We are not expecting that to be the case, councillors, but nonetheless, it's there in case that requirement did arise.
Okay, if there's no other questions, I'll move that the community facilities draft budget operating capital be accepted. Seconded by Councillor Young. Any discussion on this? Okay, we'll go to the board to vote.
Sorry, I was out of the room during the whole debate, so I
Press the
won't
green
vote.
one, Gary.
I don't even know what we're voting
Green.
on.
Yeah, just green. Gary.
What is it?
Green. Green. Go. What was it? Doesn't matter.
Carried unanimously. We have a report
just
on
voted to
community
save Lake
assistant grants.
Waikato,
That's on
Gary.
page 97.
You've become a socialist,
Lance,
Gary.
is there anything that you wanted to add to that report? It's fairly clear.
No, Your Worship, I think some councils have been involved with the working group, others
Okay.
this has been workshopped.
So Councillor Young is moving that report. It's fairly straightforward. Seconded by Councillor Gallagher. Is there any discussion on this report or any questions? Councillor O'Leary?
When it comes back to strategy and policy, simplify the criteria and the guidelines. That'll include more of an understanding on obviously how it will all work. Will there be a need to change the policy?
No, we'd hope not.
So, but you are saying that the funds that we allocate, contestable funds that we allocate to just performing arts will be going into the big pot, won't? Is that what you're saying?
That's correct.
But the report back to
Yeah.
strategy and policy will tell us how that will work.
Yes. Yep. They're the Hamilton City Council funds, not the ones that come from Creative New Zealand.
I know.
Right, any other questions or comments on this? Right, so it's been moved and seconded. We're going to vote on the board. Okay.
Carried 10-1.
The next item is on page 101, democracy activity. Blair, you're speaking to that? I don't think there's any comments you could make.
No.
It's very short. Any questions on
Worship.
this? So it's moved by Councillor O'Leary, seconded by me. Any discussions on this one? Democracy, page 101. That's correct, it's our own budget. Right, we're voting on the board, if there's no comments. Sorry, Councillor Mallard has a comment.
No, not a comment, just a question. Presumably this is primarily these are the costs of the elected members, are the wages of the elected members, our expenses, the cost of Jude and her team. Anything else?
That's directed at Blair.
I've actually, I'm here to speak to Parts with Māori, so Jason will talk to the democracy question.
What is the budget made up of?
The budget's made up of, yes, the democracy budget is made up of some of those costs. There's also the honorarias for the audit and risk, the district licensing committee, your conference costs, but also there's the elections. That's the bulk
Once
of
every
the
3
costs.
years, yep.
Once every 3 years.
And they are
Government's all-
roughly $500,000, by the way.
That's correct.
Yeah.
It's not cheap democracy, is it?
No, it's not. There's also representation reviews as well incorporated in some of that we have to do legally. Also, online voting. The government are looking to trial an online voting for the next elections, local government. So we've allowed costs for compliance for that.
And so our processes of special consultation, those things are democracy costs?
No.
What are they, where are they covered?
They sit in strategy research in the overheads area.
So the process, this cost here, probably not at the moment, but when we go at consultation and the cost of advertising, consultation, those sorts of things.
Strategy and research budget.
Right, any other questions? No, we're voting on the board then. That's good news.
Unanimous.
Passing our own budget, that's helpful.
Good start.
Yes, goes positive. Next one is parks and open spaces. Lance, it's you. Any points you want to highlight?
No, it just concentrates CapEx is on renewals, as I said when I first came up here, that we're concentrating on looking after what we've got. Like other parts of the council, Sally's team's now got very robust asset management plans and good asset condition assessment and life assessment as well of assets. So I think we're in a good place with the information that we've put forward, looking after the assets. Remembering that we look after over 11% of the land area of Hamilton City, so it's not insignificant.
Large area. Councillor Mallet, you've got some questions?
Yeah, thank you. Just with the way we're reallocating overheads and whatnot, dealing with these things now, your costs haven't gone up much at all. So probably Paul might answer this rather than, I'm not sure, Lance. So there's not as many overheads that had to be or different treatment overheads with this department.
Maybe I could answer that. Sally's area didn't attract as many occupancy costs as other asset areas of council because generally her team have looked after those assets themselves and have had the direct costs within their budgets previously. So, so there hasn't been as many changes as was highlighted, I think, when we started going through these other activities. So, but essentially her budget's pretty much a business as usual budget.
So Hamilton Gardens, which is a lot of land and a lot of buildings.
Yep.
City parks, I assume that's the lake and those sorts of things with restaurants and whatnot. Those property costs, we're not changing the way we treat those as we have changed the way we treat those in other departments.
Not as much. So Hamilton Gardens has attracted back some of the monies from the property team that were previously reflected as occupancy costs, so that they're then directly managing the assets themselves. But Sally's area and parks and open spaces outside of the Hamilton Gardens unit have generally looked after most of their own assets in the past, so you can compare apples with apples. Hamilton Gardens is a little bit different. In this budget, there is some increased expenditure at Hamilton Gardens that was brought up through the development project. There's some increased revenue as well. And obviously, if we have 4 more gardens and a bigger car park, Italian Renaissance wharf, then we do need people to maintain those and obviously have a prudent amount of budget to look after those assets going forward.
Okay. Presumably, the targeted rate goes into arriving at the surplus and/or deficit for Hamilton Gardens. Is that right?
It's reflected. The spending of it's reflected in the proposed development program in the in the CapEx program, which is the second line of the CapEx program. There's 3 years of expenditure, 265,997 and 1,082,000 on page 104.
In answer to Councillor Mallett's question, no, the revenue is not transferred into the department. Why not? When you have to do a targeted rate, surely you'd give it to the department, wouldn't you? It's in relation to a capital spend, so the capital is funded from debt, so it's held centrally. So we target a rate for the Hamilton Gardens, and when we collect that, we don't credit that to Hamilton Gardens as income. We don't do that, is that correct? That's correct, we're not doing that. Effectively, what would happen is it would create a 4-year window where their costs are different. Yeah, so we just say, if it's 4 years, we've got that, then our revenue is going to drop, which is totally explainable and transparent. And now, it just goes into the pot.
So can I add? Sorry, Paul,
Someone needs to.
Yeah. So when we come to do our annual, our 10-year plan, we do a statement called the funding impact statement. So for the activity for the gardens, it will reflect all rates associated with it being the targeted rate will go against the activity. The question I think you asked was whether or not the targeted rate goes towards operating costs, and it doesn't, effectively meeting the incremental, we call it consequential operating costs as a result of the capital out of the operating budgets, and the targeted rate only pays for the capital requirements to actually cover the feasibility of the gardens and the capital costs associated with building the gardens.
Okay. Yep, that. Just as confused as I was before. Or just that doesn't make sense to me. Doesn't have to make sense to me, just the majority.
I can chat with you offline as well.
So let's be clear here. Did you have a question on this?
Yeah, and exactly on this question. So how do we treat the funding that we anticipate getting towards the garden, the matching funding from the philanthropic groups and central government and lotteries and so forth? How do we treat that, and how have we treated that in here in terms of the further offset against the capital costs of finishing off the Hamilton Gardens?
The only thing reflected in here is the targeted rate monies that are spent on capital. My understanding is that when that money comes in, then we then reflect in the reports to the Finance Committee that we've actually spent more money, but we've also had a revenue line coming in as well. So we don't bank a potential amount in a revenue line at the moment in this budget.
So does that mean that, let's say we've got $600,000 a year coming in from the targeted rate, and our expectation is that we might get $1.2 million by way of grants to fund the gardens. Does that mean in here we are only showing the 600,000, and the capital cost of the development of the garden is shown at 600,000?
That's correct.
Okay.
Well, it's actually 2.4 over those 3 years, which I mentioned before.
Yeah. Okay, but we haven't included in here the actual full cost to develop the remaining 3 gardens beyond that 2.4 million.
No.
Understand.
Right. Any other questions on this area? Did you have something else for Paul? No?
I have a question.
Yeah.
On page 105, it's in unfunded there, down the bottom. Natural Environments Development Program, it's 539,000, and it's in growth areas. And I note you've got it down for 2018, and then it skips a year, 2020. Are those reserve areas that we don't currently have at the moment, or they are reserve areas that we do, but there's no residential growth around them?
If I can through the chair, these are areas within Rotatuna as well as Ruakura areas that we do not have yet, and it's just basically providing pathways through those areas. So it's based on future growth.
Okay, so there's no residential area around there now. Thank you. And the second question over the page on 106, this is also unfunded. Amenity Parks Development Program, and the risk if the project is not included says not meeting recreational needs of the city. It's a big ticket item at $3 million, but what exactly is the Amenity Parks Development Program?
This program is looking at developing our existing parks network, so such as Parana Memorial Park. It's talking about looking at Po Whenua. It's also around interpretation signage. So these are adding to our current offer. In terms of the proposal that's in front of you is about looking after what we have through renewals, and this would be about further developing our parks in line with management plans.
So it really isn't, these are nice to haves?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, thank
Right,
you.
I've got councillor Gallagher, then councillor Mallett.
Lance and Sally, Management Executive Team, tell me about your unfundeds a bit more. Obviously, you've had the exercise of having to exercise some tentative choices over a 10-year period, as we see it now. And yet, a lot of these, you know, in terms of just by the descriptors, are covering pretty important areas. I'm trying to get your comfort level as to having these unfunded at this point.
Well, we've really, you know, followed what the priority direction is around core services.
Yeah.
You know, like everyone, we've had to make some hard calls in those prioritisation. So we think we've done that in the most logical way possible, following council direction, and that's provided by the open space plan and other plans that we have, the pooches and parks, etc. The one thing in there that we have covered is land purchase for future reserves. So anything that's contractually committed to or through consent, we've included that in there. You'll see the first unfunded line is land purchase future reserves. So that's in some of the growth cells that Chris was talking to this morning, and you know, those areas there, you never know when the growth's going to happen and when the structure plan's been formed and that sort of thing. It's, you know, it is a bit of crystal ball gazing, as Chris mentioned this morning. So there will be, you know, to me that would be the top priority, is about actually being able to have the ability to purchase those pieces of land when they come up in those areas as they are developed. But the other ones, they, you know, we have optimised what we've done, concentrated on looking after what we've got at the moment, doing that as best as we can, and obviously hunting out efficiencies too in the way that we do that with the between Sally's team and the City Parks team as well. So the other thing I mentioned this morning was about partnerships too, around getting external funding, but also volunteer programs, working with Sport Waikato, working with community groups, NGOs, government departments. We think there's options around that. Sure, there's a limited amount to that, but we're trying to be as frugal as we can.
I mean, I know there's a pretty high level around the land purchase future reserve. That once the structure plan and we've designated an area as reserve, it doesn't in any way compromise, obviously, our ability to eventually purchase that. That's the real guts, isn't it, in terms of good urban planning?
Well, what we've done is actually said, what are we committed to contractually, what we know about at the moment.
Sure.
If other ones happen through a growth cell moving forward at a certain time, then we would have to come back to council and as a one-off, and obviously we'd come back and say, well, here's the offset that we'll, you know, this is the suggestion to the council to pay for that. We'll drop this capital project.
Coming back to the home of sport, Hamilton plan, home of soccer, whatever, and Rototuna, you know, in terms of the, you know, again, I'm looking at, and I know, you know, I don't have the easy answers at all, but I noticed that sort of the Rototuna Sports Park at this point is unfunded. Are you just saying that's a dynamic thing that we, if it, at this point we can't do it, or?
Well, there's a report later in the agenda about that.
So I'm just trying to seek out.
Yeah, so we'll be discussing
direction of travel. Okay.
Yeah.
And what I'll do is I'll give a roundup about the whole Rototuna thing. It's intertwined with aquatics and libraries and indoor
Yeah,
recreation and
that's
what's
later
going
on,
on
yeah.
at the school
Okay.
as well. So, just draw your attention, there is actually 350,000 in the funded line road at Tuna Park development. That's really
But
just
the initial, yeah.
that's really to level it, to mow it,
Yeah,
to
get
get
it
it to a
up.
basic level like Mangiti Park with
Yes.
some bollards around it.
Yeah.
That people can fly a kite, they can walk their dog, they can, kick a football around, but it's not, to our normal standards.
Councillor Mallett?
Again, on the same line, purchase of land provisions, reserves and growth areas, not particularly Rototuna. You've got a hooer of a big amount at the very last year in the unfunded. What does that relate to something specific, or is it shoveling it under the carpet, or what?
Yes, it does. It relates to a larger park purchase within the Peacocks area that's identified within the structure plan.
And that's anticipated, well, it's unfunded, but anticipated for that year.
It is, yes.
It's just unusual to see everything pushed right to the very back of the cupboard, isn't it?
It could be further out, as Chris said this morning, it depends how fast, stages 2 and 3 of development at Peacocks actually happens, and, quite often we're in the hands of developers around that, releasing land and going through structure planning processes, etc.
Okay. And so that 6.3 million, or 6.4 million really, is, that can't be one part. That's a whole lot of,
It is, the bulk of that is looking at one area, and within Peacocks, but it also includes areas in Rototuna, Rotakari, and also whether or not there's any infill in that area. So it's looking citywide.
okay. So if the bulk of it's in one part, how much are we spending on this one particular? Am I right in thinking this is one park in Peacocks, which is all because of the development going on out there, or hopefully that will be going on out there?
Yeah.
And there's one park that's going to cost 4 million.
Yeah, so it's not unusual, like the land, we've purchased over 18 hectares of land at Rototuna, quite a significant piece of land, and they don't come cheap.
Okay. So this is how many? Do you know how many? Do you actually? Is there a map with a pencil line around showing what we're buying? Or
I
is it
can-
totally
No,
conceptual?
I'm happy to provide that to you. I don't have it with me
Pardon?
today. I'm happy to provide you a copy of the map. I don't
I-
have it with me today, so.
It is quite a large green blob on the map.
Must be. Nice to see where our money's
So
going.
that's in the unfunded. You got that?
Yeah, I
Correct.
appreciate it's unfunded. Yep.
Are there any other questions on this one?
Yeah.
Yes.
There are blocks of land that come up for sale in places like Peacocks. There has been one recently right on the edge of the river for a very good price of beautiful land. Do you consider buying that kind of thing ahead of time for a park when it's instead of going out once the subdivision's all been approved and you're then held to ransom on price?
It's a higher price. And that's the
I
trouble.
might let Sally talk about that.
That sounds right. That's the issue.
Yes, we do. Obviously, if there are items of land that do come up and that they are in our future plans, we do look at them. But it obviously does depend at the time in terms of what our budgets are available for that. And so, yes, we do keep an eye on that with our strategic property team about opportunities that do arise.
Would
But
you,
some of it happens through subdivision or like taking an Esplanade Reserve and those sorts of things. What you're saying is being strategic, doing that ahead of time because it's never cheaper than now to buy the land and all that sort of thing.
well, I noticed a lot of the parks we end up with are basically bogs that developers can't use anyway, that they want to get out of but still sell us at full price. What I'm suggesting is if something came up, would even if you don't have the budget, would you come to council in confidential and propose that this was a good idea if
Yeah.
something all fell into place?
Yeah, that's correct. So we don't actually have budget for that. Going back some years, we did have, but with things getting tighter, then we don't. But we generally come to council on a case by case basis.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, councillor.
Sorry, I don't want to belabour Councillor King's point, but if it was obvious an early purchase was going to save us a swack of dough, you're telling us that you would come back in pink,
Yep.
confidential, and try and swing a deal if there was a significant saving.
Yeah, and I think Councillor King's highlighted
Yeah.
the key issue for any strategic land purchase is the timing of that, and and then you get the people on the other side of the coin who, like anyone, they want to ratchet the price if they can. So
Yeah, but and we've had this, if there are circumstances where people want to do early exit. Yeah, okay.
we do have other means. We do have the Public Works Act, and there's a whole process around that. So.
Sure. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Can you Public Works Act for parks, can you? I know you can for roads and things.
Yeah.
Oh, you can.
Right, no other questions? Okay. I'll move that this operating and capital budget be approved.
I'll second.
Seconded by Councillor Forsyth. Any discussion on it? Okay, we're going to vote on the board.
Carried unanimously.
Okay, the next item for discussion is solid waste. Anything you want to draw our attention to, Chris?
No, just a quick summary, Your Worship. The activity has got two components. Really, it's looking after our existing landfills, and the second is the curbside collection, refuse and recycling. A big issue for this activity is progress towards Council's waste minimisation management plan. A significant issue is our need to retender our major waste contract by 2017. The councils will see in the summary a spike in expenditure in year 2016-17, and that's relating to the provision of the wheelie bins. And the information sheet on the next page, 109. So we're just happy to answer any questions in relation to the activity.
Right, okay. Councillor Forsyth, you've got a question?
At this stage, I'd just like to signal whether it's an amendment or an addition to the recommendations. So can I talk about that now or later?
I'll come back to you, okay? So Councillor Gordon.
Yeah, it was just a question around the drop-off centres. There's nothing like getting ratepayers interested when they realise there is a rubbish drop-off centre opposite their house or down the end of the road. And I'm wondering what thought has been given to the location of those centres.
So you're talking about one of the reports coming later, which is the unfunded.
So this is in the solid waste management activity.
Yep.
Yes.
It's an unfunded proposal.
Yes, right. So you want to talk about that? Yep.
So I particularly want to know about that,
so there's a
either
report
now or later.
Right. So I'm wondering if we should do that when we take the report later, because it's an unfunded in here.
Page 220, I think there's an unfunded
Is the report,
item.
isn't it? So can we park that and have that discussion when we get to there? Okay, thanks. Any other questions or queries on this one?
The recycling of the wheelie bins, I presume that'll be dealt with later under the
We're going to-
page 109.
We're going to deal with that after we've confirmed this budget. We're going to deal with that report. So if you've got questions on it, you can, most will ask them now. Yep.
Do these proposed recycling wheelie bins, do they replace the green plastic box which people put out?
No, the proposal in front of you is to supplement the green recycling crates with the wheelie bins, and we're determined through the business case what goes and what, but the picture painted in front of you is the crate would be used for glass and the wheelie bin for all other recyclables, but we'll test that through engagement with the industry and the business case as we get closer to the time.
So we'd have two recycling bins then, is that right?
Correct.
Plus your normal black bags, I suppose?
Correct.
Plus your real wheelie bin, which you put out, you pay for yourself. So the whole street's going to be chock-a-block with
Rubbish tins.
rubbish tins.
Be clean though.
So the wheelie bin as proposed would be a fortnightly collection, not a weekly collection. So every second fortnight you put the recycling out.
So having the glass separate and not putting it in the wheelie bin. I know you've gone through this with us before, but just update us again.
The most significant part of the process is sorting the material.
So having the sorting occur essentially at the curb or in the private property is a critical function in terms of having a least overall cost and the most efficient recycling service.
Right.
It's particularly problematic. Well, that's not impossible, but if you blend the recycling at the curb, then it has to be sorted somewhere else, and you're then relying on technology, or it becomes more difficult to separate, and your glass can break, and with very fine particles it becomes embedded in the papers and plastic. Contamination.
Right.
It devalues the whole waste stream, so it's much better to carry out the sorting function at the house or at the curb, so hence separating glass and plastics at the curb.
So is that what other councils do? They separate out the glass from the rest?
Yep, so we're looking at a service that's not too dissimilar to the service that's currently in a did list of cities. I think it's, from memory, it's Wellington, Dunedin, Palmerston North, Manamata Piaka, Hauraki District, Thames Coromandel, all have a service along the similar lines.
So they all do that the same way?
In a general sense, yes. They're all subtly different, but in a general sense, the same way.
Right, okay, thank you. Deputy Mayor, you've got a question?
I presume these bins would have to be manufactured, or certainly bought from a manufacturer. Have you considered any opportunity to do city branding on them? Advertising message, Waikato Times might like to advertise on it, and we're getting a positive signal from the media bench.
I think we're way ahead of ourselves. Like, this is about a funding provision, and there's a lot more work to do.
Political party.
And engagement with council on how we would do it.
Election advertising.
Right.
It all has to be green if Gary's doing it.
Right, so I've got Councillor Gallagher, then I've got Councillor Mallett.
Look, I assume at the moment all we're doing is we're sort of just voting, global sum, get the thing about the levy, sort of on a per bin. But this is really, and I know we've had workshops on this, but this, and I'm picking up Leo's point, don't want to debate it here, obviously, but I think so I'm on the right page. This is just, if you like, part of a longer journey that this is attempting to address. There's the issue of recycling. I think there's further debate around fortnightly versus weekly in terms of behaviour. And I think there's a lot of work we've got to still do around the real issue of rubbish and litter, particularly in our high density areas. And I respect this is not the place to debate that. This is just the funding. So I'm just trying to get from you, Chris, just an idea of what, at this point in terms of our 10-year plan, we're sort of just making a funding allocation for. And I know we're not going the whole hog at this point.
Yep. So look, the wheelie bin proposal comes from the previous workshop that we've had with councillors, and the direction that we were given was to include in the draft LTP options for increasing our recycling, and not in this period a move towards user pays, but it's a bit of a journey. So the proposal, as I've said, includes the wheelie bin as a way to increase our cycling options. So I think you're right in the way you've expressed that. At this point in time, it's a funding provision to allow us to do that. So there's a lot more engagement with councillors to come in terms of the detail. We also want to tie this into the significant re-tendering of the contract in 2017. So with this funding provision and the objective for more recycling, there's an opportunity to work with the industry and the tenderers as well in terms of some of the options. So there is a lot more discussions with council to come, but fundamentally what this would lock in is that direction given to increase recycling by the use of wheelie bins.
So the detail obviously comes down the track, get that, and obviously there's still the discussion to be had, and Leo said it all around, how long do plastic bags last versus what happens in other cities, and the huge issue in my view, as we've discussed, around the university precinct and everything that's out there. Developing cities and other continents are tidier, better. But, I don't want to, I know I can't debate it now, but I just want to make sure that we're not closing doors. This is just a particular door we're keeping open as part of the big picture.
The contract would engage council in levels of service. So at the moment, the level of service is 2 bags per household per week. So by necessity, when we go out to contract, that level of service could be debated. Any level of service comes with a cost and implication. So the budget is built on the current level of service, which is 2 bags per household per week. But
I'm just flagging
engagement
that issue of litter where our people, our excellent people from the group go out, from the alliance, go back out and do all of that sort of clean up, responsibility of landlords, the bigger thing. Realise I can't debate it here, but all I'm doing is, to me, I'm just giving a narrow financial allocation to do this bit of the equation.
Yeah, look, I think
yeah.
that's been made really clear. So, Councillor Mallett, did you have a question?
Yes, thank you. It's regarding the wheelie bins. I see on page 110 in that financial impact pack, the 2.8 million, or 282,800,000, the way it's written, that's thousands of dollars, isn't it?
2 million. 2.8 million.
2.8 million, yep, the 2.8 million. That's an operating expense. Is that not the cost of the wheelie bins?
Councillor, you are correct. That is the cost of the wheelie bins, but because they are about under $60 each, they don't qualify as capital, and they are an operating expenditure.
Okay, so the first year we buy the wheelie bins, and that costs 2.8. Then from there on in, you're budgeting that it'll cost $30,000 a year additional to get them picked up.
So
No.
No. So
Okay, well, what's that 30,000 there?
So if I just focus on the cost to pick up, because there is an additional cost, so we're anticipating with an enhanced recycling service there will be a reduction in black bags or a reduction in tonnage to landfill, so there'll be an offset savings there to cover the collection for the new service. The $30,000 is a cost as we have growth in the city with new households coming online.
So are you, maybe I'm not reading this right, but are you saying that you think the net wheelie bins, once we've bought them, will be cost neutral?
We've done a lot of work on that. That's our belief, yes, through the analysis that we've done today, and looked at comparable cities and the shift in tonnage.
So can you, just walk me through it then, because I presumably got a truck. Now, wheelie bin, you can't pick up. You've got to have a machine, eh? So it's a different truck to the truck that comes and picks up your rubbish, where the bloke just jumps out and chucks the bags in. So presumably so there's two trucks now going, where there were one. Is that right? Three.
Not necessarily. That would be part of the tender process and the market response, because most refuse or recycling vehicles have a very short fixed life, and so most refuse contracts have a 7 or a 14-year broad term to coincide with the renewal of those vehicles. So the current contract will terminate at a point in time that's roughly optimal for those vehicles. So whoever comes in, whether it's the incumbent or somebody new, are going to have to be building a new fleet. So everything lines up here. So we have funding provision. There's a new fleet that's built. Yeah. We'll specify a level of service.
Okay, just what am I going to see on the street? I'm going to see.
You're going to see
one truck that's picking up everything.
I couldn't tell you that until we have a market response. Potentially that's not.
But are there other places that do this? And is there one truck picking up the recycling and the black bags and the weed? No.
Separate. I imagine it would be separate for the refuse, separate to the recycling.
But sorry, and so I'm just challenging your assumptions, because your assumption seems to be that, and heck, I'm a big fan of the free market, so maybe it will work, but I just can't. I think that you're going to have to have two trucks, because one's coming weekly and one's coming fortnight for a start, and you think you can get away with that cost for no additional cost except for the capital cost to start off with.
But we have two trucks at the moment. So a truck comes around and picks up your black bag, and another truck comes around and picks up your crate.
Yeah.
So there probably will be two trucks, but I think what Andrew is saying, that these are really good issues and challenges for the market. They will have some really smart ideas in how they do that as well. So we'll be going to the market and working with them and how best and how most cost effectively to deliver our service.
And the reduction in tonnage that we're essentially looking for is the reduction as a whole city. So it's the reduction in tonnage that actually ends up in the landfill, not necessarily the type of vehicle or the frequency of the vehicle on the street.
So there's a bigger picture than just the cost of picking up the waste. There might be some offsets in terms of less stuff
getting rid of it at a city
cost of sending it to the landfill. That's what we're trying to change. Yeah.
And I noticed that the recommendation is that there be another targeted rate.
Yes.
And that targeted rate is for 3 years, so like the gardens, it's a limited one. So that's a further challenge to our financial strategy, isn't it? So our rates are 3.8% plus 10% plus, if we go ahead, plus this uniform rate.
That's correct. That would be, again, outside the 3.8%. It is worth 0.68% per annum. So that would be additional, and like the targeted rate for the gardens would be in addition to the 3.8%. It is not.
It just seems to me we're moving further and further away from a commitment that an earlier council and this one has made to the ratepayers. Thank you.
So
Can I
you
just make
can,
it-
sorry.
Can I just make it clear that the financial budget that's been shown and to come through does not include the targeted rate? So the numbers in terms of the financial strategy, in terms of the debt and the balanced budget, do not reflect the targeted rate revenue included in that. So if that resolution was to go through, there would be a positive impact on the balanced budget number as well.
How does that work? That presumably the targeted rate is meant just to cover the cost of implementing.
Yeah, so the costs are included, but the revenue is not included. So in the draft plan that's been put in, the
So you've got the cost in there,
the
but-
cost, but the revenue has not been put in.
Why'd you do that?
It was a subsequent adjustment.
As what?
It was a subsequent adjustment. We originally had it included without the targeted rate, and we put that in at a later point.
Okay.
Okay, Councillor O'Leary, I've got you.
Oh, Your Worship, I was just going to move it when you're ready, and the reason I was happy to do that was because it says quite clearly in the second point and recommendation that funding is basically provisional upon a business case being approved by this council. So all of the detail is going to come back to us.
Okay. Do you have a question, Councillor Kane?
Yeah, for the CFO or the CEO. So we've got 0.68 extra for the years we pay our bins off for. What are we paying for the gardens extra?
It's $10 a year.
Yeah, what does that work out on your average?
I'll just check.
About 640 grand, isn't it?
No, I don't want the total. I want to know how much extra does that push our rates up above our 3.8%?
Yes, it does. It pushes above 3.8%.
By what?
What is
By
it?
what?
Work that out.
By what amount? By point what of a percent?
0.4%.
0.4.
Is it 10 plus GST,
Yes.
which isn't deductible?
Any further questions, Councillor King?
Yeah, I'm just adding up.
Oh, okay.
You want to calculate?
So that's nearly 5% rates increase over what we've promised the public. We've promised 3.8%, and it actually works out at 4.88%.
So have you got a question on that?
Well, my question was, how much is it for the gardens? Is it 0.4?
Yeah.
How much is it for the bins? It's 0.68. And so, am I correct that over the next few years, it's the rates increase is actually 4.88%?
No, you can't treat those figures as cumulative. So the first year that the garden rates came in, you would have had a 4.2% increase, including the garden rates. And the year that this is brought in, which was 2017, you would have 4.38% increase that particular year. But you would also have decreases and smaller increases in the years where those targeted rates come off.
So my question is, are the public paying more than 3.8% rates increase over the next few years?
They had a 4.2% increase in the year that the targeted rate came on, and they'll have a reduction when that targeted rate for Hamilton comes off. So they'll have a reduced increase that year. This is proposing a new targeted rate, so yes, if this was introduced, then the year that this is introduced, they would be having a bigger increase.
So the gardens and the wheelie bins targeted rates ever running at the same time? Or does one finish before the other starts?
They would run concurrently for a short period, yes.
Do we have any other plans for any other targeted rates?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Thank you.
Any other, yes, councillor Gallagher?
Yeah, just I'm looking at that, really, just the household impact. Because if I've got it right, you're levying $53 plus GST over 3 years for the bin, is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
So it's like a mini uniform annual charge per household. Because it's cash, it's amount, it's a quantum, it's not a percentage of what you pay. If you pay $5,000 a year, you pay 1,000, then the 3.8% is 3.8 of 1,000 or 3.8% of 5,000 or whatever. This is a cash up, bit like the $10 for the gardens. Is that right?
That's
so I'm just trying to look at in terms of, so what I'm trying to get here is impact. So obviously the households that pay lower rates, relatively speaking, like uniform, will have an impact. But this is, but then added to that, if we're looking at the equation over the next 10 years, we're going to have households who are actually getting a general rate decrease as they transfer to capital, and others who are going up. So I think just to say that just to use a blunt figure, each household's going to have a very, dare I say, different experience over the next 10 years because of the shift to capital. But I'm just confused when we talk percentage terms for what is a cash, what is a flat levy.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very good point that you raised, councillor Gallagher, because it's one amount, irrespective of what you pay for your capital value rating. It's the same amount for everyone. So it's a good point you raised.
Well, I mean, I'm not we're not having the debate here, but it is around that whole issue around, what is everyone, how do you pay for rubbish and all of the stuff, in terms of the so-called, same types of services that go into each household, et cetera, and I realise that's a debate for another day.
All right, so are there any other questions on this?
Sorry, a comment?
Yes.
Look, it was just a clarification for
Right.
Councillor Mallett.
Yeah.
In Whakatane District Council, there are 2 trucks. On week 1, there is the normal household smaller bin and a small recycling bin. On week 2, you put your household rubbish out, your recycling bin, and a much larger green waste bin. 2 different collections, 2 different trucks, and 2 different times on the same day. So there are some fishhooks, because to collect the black bags, it's big strong men throwing them up into the truck. With the wheelie bins, it's a mechanical arm that comes out of the truck and lifts because of the weight. So these are issues that we need to be very clear on.
Question, in Whakatane District Council, do they provide the service where they walk up 200 steps to collect your rubbish, or do you have to take that down to the road?
I have to walk down 200
Right, thank you.
Right.
So in Whakatane, there's another bin on top of all the other bins for your green waste.
Sorry.
So in Whakatane, on top of all the bins that we've got, you've got another bin for your green waste.
Yes, so there's a smaller bin for the household rubbish and a small bin, like we have here, for plastic bins to put your glass and your tin and your papers in. That's collected every week. In the second week, they collect that, but they also come back and take a very large wheelie bin with green waste in it, only green waste.
But our little green bin's only going to have
Oh, you've got to be kidding. This is a budget meeting. This is
So,
just
Gordon, that's
seeming
600
chaos.
steps, isn't it?
Can-
All right, okay. Any other questions on this? Enough about the bins. Any other questions?
No, not questions.
No? Right, so someone going to move this?
I move it.
Councillor Lewis moved it.
I've got an amendment too.
And is there a seconder for it?
Can I like a second amendment?
So
green bins have a hole in it?
Sorry, I'm going to second it.
Can I signal an amendment?
Amendment,
Can we do
yes,
that now or
what is it?
later?
What's your amendment?
Amendment is that I'd like to test this again, that council also, if this is going to be planned out into the future, that council also considers the costs to administer a pay-for-bag system for the non-recycling rubbish.
Sorry, what system?
A user pay system for rubbish, yeah, at the same time.
The Taron system,
No, stop.
paper bags.
Stop.
Yep.
Sorry, so you want to move an amendment
Yes,
that
that we-
asks what?
Add into this as well, that at the
Yes.
same time all that's happening, that we introduce a pay per bag system for the non-recycled rubbish.
Right, so,
second
no, just a minute here, because that requires, could I just suggest, councillors, some thought and some information put in front of us.
Well, a report to come back in March
Yes,
then, because
so
this will come back
I'm
to us.
going to ask the GM, so even though we have had a number of meetings on the waste,
Yeah, we have.
are you able to bring back some information for us in the February meeting about user pays for bags, if that, because I might take that. What I'm sort of thinking about here is there's no point in dealing with it HCC. Might as well deal with it in the total. So it might be better to defer this until February and then deal with it again totally as a whole.
Is it correct to introduce this into this paper when during briefings we've discounted it and
Yes, well-
it's not part of the paper?
Well, councillors, of course, can include additional items in papers and reports. I mean, that's up to, if there's enough support for that.
Just a point of...
Yeah, I'm going to get to that. I'm just getting something clarified here first. Because we actually have had a number of discussions on waste
I think
and these
that-
very issues. So just let me find out what's going on down there first.
Just testing the council is talking about coming back to the February meeting. That's the end of February.
25th of February
25th
it is.
February. We could bring back a discussion paper on that, of the implications of moving to user pays in conjunction with this recycling.
Okay, so what I'm thinking about doing is, if I might take that motion just as a motion, okay, because it's sort of outside the report, and test whether there's sufficient interest in bringing a report back in February about user pay rubbish bags. So if we deal with that and see what outcome comes from that, and then could I suggest, councillors, there probably would be no point in dealing with it in this report in isolation if that one's going to come back. It doesn't make sense. So just tell me again what it is that you're asking, that a report come back in February.
Yes, as to the costs to administer or implement either for council and or users on a user.
Have a look what Jude's putting. She might be close to what you want. She's trying to get it up there for you.
A user pay system for non-recycled rubbish. Well, actually, would it be rubbish? I suppose it would be the same. All rubbish, because some of it's going to be recycled and some of it's
If you
not.
call it refuse, it fits
Refuse,
into our
okay.
language, and as a suggestion, maybe it's consider the implications rather than costs to administer,
Okay.
because it could be broader than just cost.
RE.
Okay.
And costs.
Yeah, implications and costs.
And the
Implications including costs.
Including costs for a user pay system for refuse, yeah. And if I could just add that the reason,
Yep, sorry, just getting
the
clarification.
reason why I'm wanting to bring it back now is because the goalposts have changed since the last time we dealt with this issue, and the main thing being that we've now changed from a land value based rate system to a capital based, and I think that does signal a principle, and I believe that a user pay system reflects a similar principle to the capital versus land value based rating system. I think this lines up with it better. So I would like to come back and revisit that.
Right.
Just a point of clarification. Oh, sorry.
Yes, I've got that. Moved by Councillor Forsyth, seconded by Councillor Chesterman. Yeah.
So this is separate to the...
What I'm thinking it's best to do is to take this as a separate matter, and we'll deal with this first, because this is about a report coming back. And if there's support for that, then at least the staff can go away and do that, and we can make a decision on that in February. And then I'm going to turn my mind to this report in front of us. Okay, so any questions on this? Where has it gone?
Oh, no, you got the wrong thing copied.
So that's a separate motion. We'll just do the other one
So
first.
can you change it, report back to council at the 25 February council meeting.
2014. 15.
Is that clear?
Yep.
Yeah.
Considering the
Right, so we've got the mover and the seconder, good. Okay, so we're going, are there anyone questions on this or any debate? Yep.
I'd like to speak to it.
Right, go.
I don't know what the point of council briefings are, is when we had an intense briefing on this for probably an hour and a half, and we voted around the table to say we wouldn't go with it. We promised the people of the city 3.8% or 200%, whatever you like. Either way, we're breaking that anyway in this meeting. Look at what we're doing. So at 3.8%, we've turned that into 200% debt to ratio, and we're still prepared to break that, if you look at the graphs that are coming through. On top of that, we're talking about another targeted rate on top of the targeted rate we've got. On top of that, we're now talking about charging for rubbish bags, which the one set of people in the city who are going to be affected by this are families. Families have more than 2 rubbish bags. They're the one, or have more rubbish than the elderly, or the single people, or the people who have retired, or children have left home. So here we are with another rate or tax or whatever you like from our city. Then we're talking about the rate system having changed from or changing from land to capital, so it's like the waters are muddied. Let's see what we can get through, because the people won't notice, because the whole system's changing. I mean, we promised the people of the city 3.8% or 200%. Come on, guys, we're just cranking it up in every direction. Then who ends up paying for it? The ratepayer or the citizens of our city? We do have a responsibility to them as well.
Right, anyone else for or against? Yes, Councillor Turman.
My understanding of it, there is a rate set for collection on refuse, is that correct?
It's part of the general rate.
So therefore, there would be a rebate for those persons who are paying that right now that would use pay, would it not?
That's what they're going to bring back and show us, but that's right.
So it doesn't really line up with
Okay.
the interest.
All right. Anyone else want to speak? Councillor Gallagher?
Just on the, we're voting on that, but we're also going to then vote on that.
Then we're going to come to the report.
To the report. Yeah, I'm not.
So are you speaking on this one or not? No? Okay. Anyone else want to speak on this one? No? Okay, so we're going to vote on this on the board.
Carried 6 votes for, 5 against.
All right, so General Manager, just on this report that we've got about the wheelie bins, I just was seeking some guidance whether you think we can deal with this issue of the recycling in isolation with that. Can we still proceed to deal with this one?
Yes, I think you can. So the user pays as an add-on to this one. So I think this is.
Was this about
sits in
recycling and
isolation.
the other one's about black bag rubbish?
Yes.
Yep, okay. All right, so we have a mover and a seconder on this one, don't we? It was Councillor O'Leary and myself?
Thank you, yes, Your Worship.
Solid waste activity budget to approve as well.
Yeah, we're getting to that. We're going to vote on this first. So we're not dealing with the top one yet. We're dealing with the recycling, okay?
So the recycling, I mean, this just...
No, down below, yeah. We're dealing with the recycling report only currently.
Yeah.
Can we not do them both together?
No, I'm going to do them separately. All right, so is everyone clear on that one? Councillor O'Leary, do you want to speak to it? Does anyone want to speak for or against this?
Yeah.
Councillor Mallett?
I just want to reiterate everything Andrew said in terms of, and I've said it before earlier on, other factors that we are now, we've set ourselves up a financial strategy which the previous council did some hard work, and I approved of that. I approved it when we fell in behind that. We're now, and I say this a bit cautiously, but we're pretending to follow that strategy, but we're not at all. We are now deviating it from it significantly. And just on a matter of principle, I can't support that because I don't think we're being upfront and straight with our ratepayers, our citizens at all. So I will be voting against this.
Anyone else for or against? Councillor King?
Yeah, I just can't believe we're going in this direction. And you guys, I mean, I'm a newbie. I only got voted in this time. You guys got voted in last time, and you were so strong on the 3.8, which is now the 200%. Think about what you're doing and what you promised their city. Why are we taxing our people more and more? It mightn't seem much to us, but it does add up. And the people who are most affected are families by this stuff. Just think about it carefully.
Any others for or against? Okay, so we're going to the board to vote on this one.
Carried 6-5.
Right, thank you. Now we're going to vote on the budget for the solid waste management activity, which is the operational and capital budget on the sheet. So I'll move that. Is there a seconder for that? That's the one up the top.
Sorry, Your Worship, what page are we on?
This is page
109?
107.
107.
107? That one. Who's going to second that?
Sorry, on page 107, I don't have a recommend. What?
This is the solid waste management activity budget.
Is that?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So we've been working through each of these and dealing with them one by one. So this is the last item before we break. So is someone seconding this? You?
Just a question. Does that include the targeted rate?
It includes the funding. Yes, it does.
The activity statement that you've got in front of you includes the cost of the bins, but does not include the targeted rate.
Okay, so I could vote for this, and that would not contradict. If I voted for this, and I didn't put the targeted rate in, I would still be expecting the ratepayers to pay for it some way, wouldn't I?
That's right.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
But it would be paid out of the 3.8 and not the targeted amount.
Okay.
This is out of the general rate.
Yeah, right. Well, I just want to don't want to be contradictory in the way I'm voting. That's all. So,
clear.
Thank you, Rob. I think I'm clear. So that this is still subject to the 3.8 rate cap, isn't it? Yes, because you said it didn't include the targeted rate. It included the cost of it. So that would assume that savings would have to be found elsewhere to do this. Okay.
Sorry, just to be really clear, so we're voting for other things as well as that. You've got your green bins, your recycling bins in there. The money to buy them is in here, but there's no targeted rate.
The original budget had no targeted rate included. Council has just voted for a targeted rate. We have obviously not had a chance to update any of the schedules for that targeted rate impact as of now. And we'll bring a summary schedule to you tomorrow to show the impact of that targeted rate. But all of these schedules were prepared on the 3.8% being the only rate increase at that stage.
Okay, so you're clear. So at the very end, there will be the final resolution that picks up all the adjustments, which we will then bring all together. Okay, is everyone clear? Yes? Okay.
Thank you, Worship.
Right. Deputy Mayor?
Deputy Mayor.
Right.
So, sorry, I'm not clear. So if I vote for this, am I voting for the resolution that just got passed in support of... No, I'm not.
Can I give some clarity here? So basically this is the operating budget you'll be voting on. Like, for example, the Hamilton Gardens operating budget, the Hamilton Gardens targeted rate wasn't included in that, which is the operating costs associated with the Hamilton activity. What we're talking about here is the operating costs associated with the solid waste. It doesn't look at the funding side. So if you vote for this one, you are not voting for the funding side of it, you're voting for the cost side of it, which includes the costs of the recycling bins, but not the funding that was voted on in the previous activity. So just for clarity, I hope that that's pretty clear.
Okay, going to the board.
Carried unanimously.
Right, so we now adjourn till tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. Thank you.